Well, good morning again, everybody, and welcome to the Wallace Room. If you have any questions today, please pop them in the chat. And if you're tweeting today, please use the hashtag SMC2021. My name's Iona Coutts, and also here today is my colleague Jaclyn Andrews. And we are both Numeracy and Maths Education Officers with Education Scotland. Our Twitter handles are on the screen, along with our Teams handle at EdScotMaths. And today we hope to give you some tips and ideas for taking numeracy and maths learning outdoors. Feel free to follow and tag us if you go on to use any of these ideas that you see today. We know that you'll all be at different places in relation to taking maths outdoors. Some of you might be completely new to it, and some of you might be very experienced, and some of you are likely to be somewhat in between. We've included a wide range of activities and ideas in our session, so no matter what your experience is, hopefully you'll get some ideas to take away with you. Before we look specifically at maths outdoors, we thought it'd be useful to look at a couple of generic outdoor learning points. The first picture comes from the Scottish Advisory Panel for Outdoor Education and the Learning Outdoors Support Team in East Ayrshire, and it gives you some really useful tips for learning outdoors. It can also be helpful if we view it as learning outdoors rather than outdoor learning, as it makes it less of a sort of standalone idea and integrates it more with your general everyday learning, teaching and assessment across the curriculum. The second picture comes from an article written by Rob Bushby very recently and discusses the benefits of learning outdoors, particularly given the current context. It also has lots of really useful links included in it, and it's definitely worth a read. Before you start, it's worth also taking into consideration national and local guidelines in relation to handling of equipment, as some of your local guidelines, we have specific guidance onto how you need to use equipment and sharing equipment between learners. So I'm going to pass over to Jaclyn, who's going to look at some hints and tips for generally for teaching maths outdoors, and then look at early and first level.
Thanks, Iona. Just checking that you can hear me okay, Iona?
Absolutely fine, yeah.
Great. I just noticed there's a comment in the chat about sound. Sometimes, I don't know about Zoom, but I know that in Teams, if you leave and then rejoin, sometimes that can make a difference. I don't know what the reason is for it, but maybe that might work. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that will work if you try that. As Iona said, I'm Jaclyn Andrews, Education Officer at Education Scotland. I've got a real passion for outdoor learning, hence the session today. But as Iona said, everybody's coming to this from various different points. So we just want you to feel comfortable today, and please just stick anything in the chat as you go along, and we'll periodically check the questions and address them as well. So on this slide here, there's just some initial ideas that might get you started. And if you are new to learning outdoors, then it's a good idea to kind of probably start small, just to kind of build your confidence up as you go along as well. And this slide here contains just some pointers to help you get started. So you can kind of read through them as I'm talking just now as well. What I did want to kind of highlight was outdoor boxes. These can be a really good idea if you've got some money available to put some things into them within your budget. But if you don't have funds, you can also make these up using resources that you've got within your setting. And I just found that in my personal experience, when it comes to learning outdoors, the easier we make it on ourselves to get out, the more likely it is that we will actually then take that learning outdoors. So the outdoor boxes that I created when I was in school a few years ago were just big plastic tubs that we'd bought, just like the one there, and we filled them with a variety of stuff. So some of the things that we had in it were chalk, and that I would say is chunky chalk, because it just lasts better. We had compasses, we had clipboards, we had tracing paper. I'm trying to think what else we had. We'd string. There was loads of things. And if you've got any ideas, please just stick them in the chat, because other people can benefit from those ideas as well. You know, pencils, all sorts of things like that. And we just kept them in this box so that we could just lift it up and go outside. And it also meant sometimes we could have a bit of spontaneity as well. Like, oh, let's, you know, it's really nice today. Let's just take this outside. And it just made things a bit easier for us as well. Sometimes parent councils might be willing to fund these. I know that the school that my own children were at, the primary school they were at, the parent council funded it, and I made the boxes up for them. So sometimes, you know, they're looking to put a wee bit, although parent council budgets might be a bit lower this year, not having had a lot of their events. So another thing we've put in here is playground markings as well, because some schools have also chosen to invest in permanent playground markings just to kind of help them make things easier as well. So some examples that you could invest in and get put in your playground, should you have the space, and we're not saying you have to do this, it's just an idea if you're looking to spend some money, maybe 10 frames, empty 10 by 10 grids, empty number lines. And again, if any of you have got examples of playground markings that you think are useful for other people, then please stick them in there as well. A lot of them can be drawn with chalk, but it just saves time if they're out there permanently as well. I'm just going to pause here because I noticed that the chat is going quite fast, which is great. I love the interaction. Is there anything, Iona, that you think we need to kind of just mention just now?
Yeah, I like the idea of crayons for ribbons outside. I'd welcome, there's a question saying, I welcome a list of resources to compile for an outdoor learning box. I think that's something we could definitely put together and put on our outdoor learning page on our site.
I've actually got that already, so we can just add that to our PLC later.
Yeah, cool. Clipboards, definitely very useful. Roll up tens frames, yep, and liking the idea of outdoor boxes, topic specific boxes, as a good idea for secondary. Scale drawing resources in a box all ready to go, and a blank 100 grid are all the ideas that have come in the chat. Yeah,
I mean, it's great. It just saves you scrambling around trying to get things, and you know, time is so precious, so the easier we can make it on ourselves, the better. So if you are looking to get some markings, kind of talked about that in the previous slide, what we would recommend is an empty number line, because it can be used at all stages, you know, for example, whether it's just initial numeral recognition, it could be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, you can use it for fractions, decimal fractions, time interval, there's loads you can use it for. So, you know, just empty number lines, great. And actually some of you will have lines in your playground already that you can just use for that anyway without having, you know, specific ones set. We've also got some other ones on there, the empty number lines, empty grids, the Cartesian diagram, Venn and Carroll diagrams can be useful, but again, they can be drawn with chalk. It's just making it as easy as you can for yourself. And the thing is as well, across this country, we're all faced with really different settings, you know, so for some there's, you know, outdoor areas are really readily available and they're expansive, whereas some feel that you might be in a wee bit of a concrete jungle, and that can be a wee bit tricky. And if that is the case for you, what I would suggest is that, you know, if you're out walking in your own personal life, take a bag with you and just collect sticks, stones, leaves, and find somewhere to store them in your school that you can. Obviously, you'll need to replenish the leaves because they will die off. But just if you can gather some resources, it just makes life a wee bit easier if you're not able to leave the premises easy enough as well. So on the right hand side here, we've got a quick example of just one way that sticks can be used for measure across all of the different levels. So you can see here how you can use sticks very progressively. So it starts off at kind of very early level activities and moves on through the levels there as well. And it's just, you know, sticks can be used for almost all of the things that we're going to talk about today. But this was just to kind of show that progression for you, and just with a simple resource such as sticks. What I should say is, I should probably have kind of said this earlier on, is that we're just kind of talking about it generally just now, then we're going to look at early, first, second, third and fourth level. So there is that natural progression. A lot of what we talk about, the activities can be adapted across the levels as well. So it may be that when I go on to talk about early, you're actually in a different level that you're working on, but that's fine. Just think about, could this activity be adapted using, you know, at my level and things like that as well. And you'll see that some of them, you know, it's quite natural, and we will highlight that as well. Okay, On this slide, these ideas have been taken from a webinar that I went to during Maths Week Scotland, and it was led by Juliet Robertson. And some of you, if you've got an interest in outdoor learning, might have been at that as well. But it was a great webinar, and we've put a link to it there on the chat and on the slide there. And we really would recommend that if you've got an interest in this, it's something that you look at. But I just wanted to make sure that I gave Juliet the credit for this and that I wasn't just pinching her ideas. So one of her ideas was that each learner could have their own pocket rope that measures exactly 1 metre, because there's a lot that you can do with that. Then you can, you know, is it shorter or longer than a metre? Is it about the same as a metre? It can start off like that, but it can also be progressed as well, because then you can mark them in 10 centimetre markings, and you know, as the learners progress through the levels, again, there's lots you can do with that. But you can also use these metre ropes as empty number lines as well, which is another way of using them. And I have been told that there are certain hardware shops that have got nylon braiding for very small cost as well, if you were looking to do something like this. Another idea that Juliet had that I really liked was using a large non-fitted, and that's the key here, sheet or an old tablecloth, and drawing out a large 10 by 10 grid. And this is really useful if you're not able to have one permanently marked in your playgrounds, because you can actually just lift this up, fold it up and put it away again. And there's loads you can do with that, whether you're doing grid references or coordinates or you know, symmetry. There's loads you can do with that as well. And on a similar note, she also recommended pocket 10 frames, so using a wee bit of light coloured material and a permanent marker and marking out a 10 frame on that, and learners are able to have them in their pockets and they just pull them out and they can lay them on the ground and they can collect items and things. And an alternative that I've put in here, if you don't have that, is 10 egg boxes are also really useful. So, you know, at the early stages, they're looking at subitizing how many have I collected. And these are stackable, so it means that they can, you know, you can just store them quite easily and take them outside and take them inside quite easily as well. At that point, anything in the chat, Iona, and then I'll move on.
It was just to say that the slides are actually available already on our professional learning community site that I've popped the link to the chat in. That's our site on below that has all our support advice. We have a one-stop shop for numeracy and maths. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but yes, the slides are available and the sessions all the sessions today are being recorded, so you'll be able to see the other sessions today as well.
And I'm just noticing as well, somebody's saying that they use shells instead of manipulatives because they didn't have access to manipulatives, and great, love that. And there'll be people here today that, you know, work near a beach and would be able to use that as well. So great example. Shells didn't come to my mind because I'm not right next to a beach, but I think so actually it's great, and thank you for bringing that up. So over the next couple of slides, we're just going to look at some practical ideas at early level that hopefully you could use or adapt to suit your own setting. We'll go through each level a couple of slides at a time, and then we'll take a wee moment to just pause and reflect. So I'm not going to go through each of these activities individually. As Iona said, this is available on our website, but also if you want to take photographs today just to store on your phone, we're absolutely fine with that as well. Please just snap away at anything that you want to do. And if there's anything you want clarified about anything that you see or I talk about today, just please stick it into the chat as well. So one of the activities I was going to look at here is at the top left-hand side there we have find the number. And I'm not going to read these out to you because, you know, you're all able to read that as well. But something that you can also do to extend this is you could maybe hide the numerals around the designated area and then they have to find them. Or this could be extended into find two numbers and add them together or subtract them. And as you go further up through the school, you can hide numerals and set competitions. For example, who can be the first to find me a factor of 18? And you can see how a simple activity like that can also be extended into another level. Looking at time, which is the box next to that as well, part of our recently released Numeracy Professional Learning Resources focuses on time. And I've seen quite a lot of analogue clocks drawn in playgrounds, but also using number lines when teaching time as well, and just a straight line. That can also be really useful of developing an understanding of time. And anyone who was at our time webinar will see how we did that. But there is also a recording to that of the time webinar, should you have an interest in that, on our website as well, which I will draw attention to later. So these are all examples of how like these resources and activities can be taken outdoors, and we've got more examples within our professional learning resources as well. We've tried to embed that throughout what we're doing as well, so please have a look at them if you've got time at some point. Looking at the numbers one, this could be extended as learners progress into addition and subtraction. You know, so for example, Tom has found 5 leaves and Sally has found 3. How many do they have altogether? Or what is the difference between the number of leaves they have? And again, 10 frames can be really useful for this. So this might be drawn, or it might be those pocket 10 frames that we mentioned earlier, or using those 10 egg boxes, and then they can use them to collect the items or place them down. So you might ask questions such as, I wonder how many items you've collected. How do you know? I wonder how many more you would need to make 10. And these are just some examples of just some activities that you can do with them. At the top of this slide, you can see there's a number line drawn with chalk, but it's really important that we provide a variety of vertical and horizontal number lines as well. Just couldn't get the horizontal one in this slide. And this applies to all the levels, whatever we're looking at as well. And the last one I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail on this slide is patterns. And it's important to note these patterns don't just have to be with physical materials. So it doesn't need to be drawn shapes or things that we collect. It can also be moving patterns such as hop, skip, jump, or star jump, burpee, you know, something like that. And if you take learning outdoors, it means that you've got that space to do this and allow that creativity for learners to create their own patterns using lots of physical movement as well. But of course, you can create lots of fantastic visual patterns using the outdoors as well. So it's, there's lots you can do there, lots of scope there. Next early level one. So first of all, let's look at number collections. The ideas here can also be extended as learners progress. So for example, that is great, you have found 5 leaves. I wonder what would happen if you found 2 more, or who has collected the most stones? I wonder how we could work that out. And one thing I would say is that problem solving has its own box here, although it doesn't seem to be. It's on the No, do you know what I've done? I've taken the problem solving out because I was trying to make a point, but I've not taken it out of the other slide. Basically, problem solving had its own box in this slide, and it does in further slides, but I'd taken it out because we don't really want to see problem solving as separate. We want to see it as embedded across all of this. So it shouldn't be that we're like, right, let's go outside and do some problem solving today. Problem solving should be taken into, you know, we should be doing that and covering it when we are going out with all the time outside and inside the classroom as well. So when you're setting them challenges at early level, you'll have heard me say it already, but posing I wonder questions really do help develop these problem solving skills as well, because it throws that learning ownership onto them as well, rather than us always guiding them, although they do need that scaffolding at times as well. There's also some examples of symmetry, some activities that you can use in symmetry here, but there are some more examples from the Maths Week Scotland packs that we created last year. And again, Iona will make a wee bit of reference to them later on. You can see here that there's a section on addition, but really it's important that we're making those links between addition and subtraction and exploring them together. And you can again use 10 frames for this or partitioning. And you can see up here that we've got a cherry diagram at the top. So we've got a 5, and in one of the branches, we've got 3 items, and in the one on the right, we've got 2, although the 2 is a wee bit faint. But you can see how just simple cherry diagrams can be used at early level, but they can also be used with more complex figures as they move up the stages as well. When it comes to data handling activities, it's important to try and provide opportunities for learners to make decisions about how they want to sort the items that they've collected. And again, you might need to provide some support for this, but do allow them that opportunity to make decisions as much as possible. So that's it for early level, and I do appreciate that we're going really fast through this, but it's because we've got so many ideas we want to share. And this is being recorded, so you will be able to access it later, and you'll have the presentation slides that you can access through our site, that you can just stop and actually breathe and look at it in time as well. Iona, before I go on to first level, anything that I need to look at?
Yeah, I've just actually popped the link direct to the slides. You will need your Glow login to be able to access them, but that's the link to these slides. So I think that, as we've had before, folk like these planners, they like these grids, and so there was some requests for them. So I've just pop the link to that in the chat. That's direct to our presentation slides.
Great, thanks. And also please share widely, share with all your colleagues, share with your cluster. Happy for these to go, you know, as if to anyone that you think would benefit from them as well. Okay, so moving on to first level. And you'll see that from these next couple of slides that some of these activities are really just quite a natural progression from the early level ones as well. And if I can highlight anything from this, it would probably be to keep using the links between the different operations. So for example, if we know that 4 times 5 is 20, what else do we know? Well, we also know 5 times 4 is 20, 20 divided by 4 is 5, 20 divided by 5 is 4, 1/4 of 20 is 5, and so on. And you can see on the left-hand side that we've made we've made that explicit there. And on the right-hand side at the bottom corner there, you can see again how visually we've linked all of those different facts using some leaves and sticks there as well. Again, what I've seen about problem solving, just make sure that it is embedded into everything that we're doing there as well. You can see here how cherry diagrams have been extended. So in the last one we had just simple, straightforward 5. This time we've got it as 75. So 75 could also be, we've got it here as 1525, but it could also be 60 and 10 or 5 and many, many other ways. And it's good, again, if you've got that space in your playground, then learners can draw loads of different cherry diagrams and then look at each other's. Well, what did you get? Oh, that's different from mine. But does that matter? Because it's still the same number. It's just been partitioned in different ways. You could also draw chalk bar models as well. And if bar models is something that you're not familiar with or you would like to know a wee bit more about, we also have a guide on our professional learning resource, which just summarises what bar models are and offers some different examples of it as well. And it's just a really nice short 2-page guide if you want to investigate that a wee bit more. And in relation to the fraction activities here, another thing that I saw, and I think it was actually during Maths Week Scotland, was learners creating fraction walls outside using chalk as well on Twitter. So lots of ideas in there. And we'll just move on to the second of the first level slides. So again, the Maths Week Scotland packs that we talk about later have lots of symmetry and grid references in them, but they'll come up later on. For measurement, we gave you some examples earlier about how sticks could be used, but you could also find items and weigh them. If you take your scales outside, for example, which is heavier, 10 sticks or 10 stones, so you can see how problem solving is very naturally coming in here. How can we check? But making sure that we're always estimating first. What might make a difference to this answer? Does it matter if the sticks are bigger or if we've got larger stones? What would make a difference? Also angles, we've got something about angles in here. This is an interesting one because learners will quite often realise that a lot of the right angled items that they find outside are man-made, and you can get a really good discussion going from that kind of activity as well. We've got some more data handling here, so you can see here we've got just a simple carrot diagram. Is it green, not green, leaf, not a leaf? It's a wee bit tricky to see the chalk writing in that, but you get the idea. You could also create bar charts, give them opportunities to decide how they want to display the items that they've collected. And also going back to early level and also at first level, they could create pictograms with the resources that they found as well. So they could just have a pictogram of leaves or sticks or whatever it is that they've collected. So second level, everything okay in the chat? Seems to be good. Okay. So at second level, the symmetrical pictures should then extend into multiple lines of symmetry, and learners can create images using chalk or any items that they found really at all. Or you could also have that one child creates an image and a partner could create the symmetrical image of that. So you can see these are quite easy activities that you don't have to do too much prep for, just making sure that they have access to material round about them as well. In shape, you can also look at 3D objects within the natural environment, and you can draw nets on the ground. You could also look at composite shapes using sticks and finding the area or the perimeter of these. And on this slide in the middle here, we talk about Fibonacci and bringing it to life and looking for examples in real life. And this link here is just a really nice short video that you could look at with learners before you go outside. It's a nice visual and short video as well. We talked earlier about having a painted 10 by 10 grid because that can be really useful in teaching how to plot points. And if you don't have a permanently painted 10 by 10 grid, then you can use the sheets that we talked about earlier on in the session. You could draw them out, but I've done that, been there, done that. It takes a while to make sure that you draw it out well. So that can be trickier. I would say that the sheet or the permanent markers would be better. But the sort of things you could do with this is, you know, if they're in at first level, you could be looking at A3 or B6, put this stone on B6. Whereas in second level, you'd be moving on to, could you place place this stone on the point 4, the coordinate 4, 3, and so on. You could get them to draw pictures just as you would do probably in their jotters normally, but this is just a bit more active and exciting for them doing outside. There's also quite a lot of measuring activities that can benefit from being carried out. But again, I said earlier on about estimation, and it is really important that we make sure we are giving them that opportunity to make estimations before they measure any distance or durations of time or anything like that. A really nice activity that I saw once was some pupils were using small syringes to collect water and measure puddles within the playground. But again, posing that question, I wonder which puddle's the biggest? Well, how can we do that? And getting that discussion coming from them and then eliciting out of them, well, we need to get that water and actually get it into some sort of measuring jug to find out how much is actually in that. But in the one, when I saw it happening, what they had to do was estimate before they started by putting them into order of most to least water. And the results for them were quite surprising, which was nice because most had only considered how wide the puddles were, but hadn't considered that some of them might be deeper than the others as well. So that was just a nice activity. And the last second level one here, looking at decimals and measure, these can be linked really quite nicely together. And learners could use meter sticks to draw lines and mark the decimal fractions on them. They could also mark the fractions on the same line to demonstrate the links between fractions and decimal fractions, and then extend this into percentages. And you can see here there are some other ways that fractions, decimal fractions and percentages can be reinforced outdoors. So just on the left-hand side here. So for example, in the middle picture there, we've collected 4 items, 3/4 of them are leaves, 0.75 are leaves, or 75% are leaves. Obviously, you can extend that and collect many more. We just kind of put the 4 in there just for simplicity as an example. We mentioned the man-made right angles here again, as it's probably worth a quick revisit at second level, but when they get into second level, they can start to progress into drawing or measuring acute, juice, straight, and reflex angles too. They can create pictures using sticks or chalk, and then they can mark what the different types of angles are. And if some of them are needing additional challenge, then you could ask them to create a picture that has a specific number of each type of angle. So for example, can you draw me a picture that's got 4 acute angles, 3 obtuse, you know, and 2 right, or whatever, you know, I've just made that off the top of my head, but something like that as an example. Maybe they could set each other challenges, or they could draw pictures and count how many obtuse angles they've got, how many acute angles, and so on. Natural items and chalk can also be used to create algebraic equations. So here we've got leaves, but you can use anything really, whether that's pine cones, stones, shells, you know, whatever. And we also talk about negative numbers here because at second level they are introduced. It's not that we're asking you to learn us to add and subtract at this stage, but we are at second level introducing an awareness of them. So they can plot them onto empty number lines. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but making sure that they're both vertical and horizontal, because I noticed earlier in the chat, somebody was talking about temperature gauges, which again is a great context for negative numbers, particularly. And they can also spend time looking for negative numbers in the world around them. And then as they move into third level, they'll start carrying out calculations with negative numbers. Again, you can use your number lines to assist with that. So I'm going to give you a break from my voice now. Just a quick monitor of the chat, Iona, before we. No, it seems to be okay. So
the equations are getting a lot of love in the chat. So yeah, and being able to actually do balancing with your, we could move towards 4 leaves equals 20, but actually having 4 leaves balancing with 20, and then thinking, you know, you can. What would 2 leaves be? What would 1 leaf be, and so on? We can introduce that idea that way. So yeah, there's lots of love of the equations. So grand.
Okay, I'll hand over to you for some secondary level work.
Thanks. So yeah, I suppose that there might be a bit more scepticism within secondary colleagues about taking classes outside, because the logistics of taking secondary classes outside can be a little bit more complicated. But on the slide here is just a few top tips here. Sending out a reminder the day before could just be a real help here. And now that learners are used to using Teams or Google Classroom for their while they're been working at home, that's obviously a good vehicle for actually doing that, sending that reminder out. Just to save a bit of time, being able to meet your learners outside so they're not having to troop up to the classroom and then back outside, it can just save you a little bit of time, because there is a logistical issue about maybe having a shorter period of time where you can work it with learners. Leaving a note on the door to say where you are for those stragglers, and also potentially having a buddy in the corridor who just gets those stragglers and says to them, no, remember you had a reminder, you're working outside, go and meet your teacher, whatever. Having somebody there just to round up the stragglers in the corridor would be quite handy as well. A lot of these ideas will probably be more important if you are new to working outside with your learners. But as your learners get more used to it, then hopefully you'll need less and less of these kind of mitigations. It can be tricky fitting outdoor work into shorter periods of time, particularly if your lessons are quite short. So it's maybe worth exploring how you can share time with other departments. So if you've got a group of learners that back to back are working with yourself and a colleague, could you actually share that time and work together on a more extended piece of work? And we say in an awful lot of secondary work, can we look outside our maths departments? Can we work with other colleagues within the school? Can we work with other agencies? Could we work with local employers? Could we work with parent partners to work on an outdoor project? It's always worth just thinking about those opportunities as well. So we are going to look at a few activities and ideas for third and fourth levels. And quite a few of these activities you might already do inside, but maybe haven't thought about doing them outside. But with the right playground painting, you can take them outdoors quite easily. And I know Jaclyn's mentioned a painting on the playground if you can manage it. And I can't recommend this enough. So if you have 100 square, that would be great. A chessboard is terrific if you can manage to get that. So as Jaclyn mentioned, it's worth, if you can get your parent council to help out, if you haven't got those already, that would be great. The 100 square really does continue to be a valuable resource in secondary at levels third and fourth levels, for exploring more complex sequences, for exploring multiples and primes, for example. So if you, it's good to use 100 squares both inside and outside if you can. A chessboard is particularly good. So loads of nice activities you can do. So the one outlined there is looking at the classic chessboard legend about 1 grain of rice on the first square, 2 grains on the second, 4 grains on the third, 8 grains on the fourth, and so on. How nice would it be to actually physically explore that by collecting items outside to see that exponential growth happening on a sort of bigger scale, which we might not be able to do inside. And when they run out of space for concrete items, could they start writing the numbers in chalk, for example, on the chessboard? And when they run out of space to write the digits in full, maybe that's an opportunity to start thinking about scientific notation, for example. So you could start exploring these really big numbers on a bigger scale outside. In my experience, I would say ratio and proportion and its links to fractions and data and probability can be overlooked. It's sometimes quite hard to get that learning all sort of joined up in the classroom. So this first activity of really grabbing together all these ideas by doing some sort of collection of natural materials outside might be a way to draw it together, and it might be something that you could make a link to biology or environmental science as well. Outdoor number lines, if you've got empty number lines, so you can extend them past 0, so learners could physically explore addition and subtraction of negative numbers, for example. And again, exploring angles a bit further, there's a real common misconception amongst learners that as if they're just not quite thinking about carefully enough, that as shapes get bigger, so do the angles. And because we always tend to draw shapes at you know, quite small and on a page in the jotter or something, could we actually draw really big triangles outside and make it really, really clear that the sum of the angles remains 180 degrees, regardless of how big the triangle is? So going on to the next slide, a few more ideas here. There's lots of opportunities to collect data outdoors, and it's worth taking time to think about how you can make this work at third level specifically by looking at sample size and bias, for example. So if you're collecting data outside, how are you collecting it in a way that's not going to introduce bias into your samples? So for example, if you were looking at collecting different types of leaves, if you collect them all from underneath the beech tree, then obviously you're going to get a higher number of beech leaves as compared to other things. So it just is a way to, in a very concrete way, help learners explore these ideas of bias. There's lots of scope for creating patterns and sequences within patterns outdoors. Learners can experiment with a range of materials and make different geometrical shapes to investigate what patterns and sequences they can create within those. And when we're thinking about scale, the scale you can work at outside can help learners really reconnect with their feel for measurement, because I sometimes think in the maths classroom, measurement has become a bit abstract, and it becomes about converting units, and it becomes about performing calculations, and we maybe lose a little bit of that ability to estimate and measure accurately. So by working outdoors, you get to use different devices like measuring tapes, trundle wheels, that kind of thing, to actually measure larger distances. And we can look at scaling drawings up rather than down. For example, we do a lot of taking big objects and scaling them down and drawing a scale drawing in our jotter. Well, how about taking a small diagram and scaling it up to try and draw on a big scale on the playground, something we do very rarely. Moving on to fourth level, as the mathematics gets more abstract, the opportunities do start to thin out a little bit at fourth level. But there is always the potential to take the softer skills of problem solving, communication, teamwork, and using those skills along with numerical skills from earlier levels to solve more complex problems outdoors. Ideas of data, measurement, scale, shape properties, they're all still relevant to fourth level learners though, and more complex examples and problems can still be explored outside. It's also likely that learners at this stage could be involved in numeracy-rich activities from other areas of the curriculum at this level. And so it's always rewarding to work with colleagues, as I said earlier, to work with colleagues from other departments and help them plan activities like that, just so that the numerical content can be made really clear to learners, and to help them develop and recognise that they are developing their numeracy skills. There's one outdoor painting that I would hugely recommend if you can get it though, and that is a Cartesian grid in 4 quadrants. This can be useful right from second level, where we're starting to learn about plotting points, and then plotting points in 4 quadrants. But then we can start plotting families of points for graphing linear functions. We could get pupils to be the points, and then they could hold a string or a rope to represent lines and curves and functions as they start to develop that understanding. It's really visual and impactful and nigh on impossible to do in the classroom. Believe me, I tried on a rainy day with a class of third years, moving the desks aside and trying to get them being aligned with axes that are drawn on the floor. Absolutely impossible, just not enough space. Getting them outside, being able to do this. And of course, because this is very extendable into National 5 learning and higher learning as well, looking at straight line, quadratics, circles, other polynomials, that kind of thing. By doing it outside, it potentially it helps learners see that this learning is all linked together. Plotting points, collections of points as lines, parabolas, other polynomials, circles. It's all linked together. And I don't think learners often see that. And perhaps by taking them outdoors and showing them that, this will remind them and help them see that this is actually just all linked together. Is there anything on the chat about 3rd and 4th level? Drawing giant
no.
triangles.
Oh yeah, that's just come in when I was trying to find the YouTube link for the the presentation as well.
Okay.
Yeah, no, just some love. There is somebody that can't access this, they're a student, but I've said just to email us, and it might be that you are able to turn that on for them.
Or alternatively, we can email out if you I can pop or we can pop our email address, one of our email addresses in the chat.
Mine is in there.
Jaclyn. Yeah, great. Thanks.
So just if there's anything you can contact us, or if you've got any difficulty accessing anything, just let us know and we'll see what we can do.
Absolutely. Just checking the time, got a couple of minutes left. So just a couple of slides here. I'm sure you'll be aware of Maths Week Scotland, which this year, big plug, 27th of September to the 3rd of October this year. But one of the themes of last year's Maths Week Scotland was learning outdoors. And our team created packs for activity packs for early 3 to 4th levels. And some of them included additional ideas for learning and teaching maths outdoors. So there was a link in the chat earlier to the activities for Maths Week Scotland. So they're still there from last week and you can still find them. And as I kind of pointed towards in the chat, and we said earlier on, you can find these slides and the recording of this presentation on our professional learning community website on Globe, which I cannot recommend to you enough. It's been a real labour of love over the last year from our team. It's on Globe, and this, if you can make it your one-stop shop for ideas, tips, advice and guidance onto learning and teaching maths, really do recommend it. And from our homepage, if you click the Learning, Teaching and Assessment tile, you will find there our outdoor learning page. And on there, there's these materials for this presentation, but there's lots of other helpful links and publications as well. So one more click, that's the next click is just the link to that page, which is also on the chat. There is one more slide as well. When you get the slides, there's a few more links there as well that might be of help to you. The top left box is a bit more general support for learning outdoors. The top right one is more specific to maths, and the Wakelet at the bottom again is more general support. So we're pretty much bang on time, 10:49. That's the end of our presentation. I can't thank you enough for joining us on a Saturday, and a nice Saturday as well. The weather's lovely here, certainly. So thanks very much for joining us. If you have any questions, do get in touch via Twitter or email. And we very much hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much for joining us.
Iona, there was just somebody in the chat just saying that they're struggling to access it through Glow. So if the